Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Take Your Nonprofit Marketing Leadership to the Next Level. My name is Christina Galgary-Campbell and I'm the Director of Communications at Independent Sector. We're a diverse membership community of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure all people in the United States thrive. This webinar is brought to you by Independent Sector and Prosper Strategies, the leading marketing and communications consultancy for the nonprofit sector. I'm joined here today by our moderator, Alyssa Conrarty, President of Prosper Strategies, and the leading marketing firm for nonprofits, and two special guests, Chloe Lahre and Caitlin FitzSimons from OneGoal. Welcome, everyone.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Christina.
So many of you have joined us for earlier webinars in this series. This is the 8th in a 13-part series Prosper Strategies has put together, focused on the concepts in their nonprofit marketing manifesto, which lays out 10 commitments nonprofits can make to ensure their mission impacts through marketing. In December's webinar, we kicked it off by talking about the manifesto as a whole, and each month since, we've taken up one of the commitments. This month's focus is commitment number 7, which says we will ensure marketing is overseen at the highest level of our organizations and contributed to by everyone on our team. We'll send around a recording and the slides after today's webinar, so don't worry about taking too many notes. And so, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Alyssa and our team to get started.
All right. Well, thanks, Christina. As always, really excited to be here with all of you virtually today. And Chloe and Caitlin, thank you so much for joining as our guests. Before I dive in, would just like to take a moment to help everyone on the line orient yourselves with GoToWebinar and greet some of you. Like to do this always at the start of our webinar so we can see where people are joining from. So as you can see on your screen, we'd like you to find the questions box. This is the box that you can use throughout today's webinar to ask questions of myself and our guests. We'll be keeping an eye on this questions box throughout the whole webinar, and at the end, we'll circle back and pick some of your questions out to answer, both myself and then Chloe and Caitlin will chime in and answer some of your questions. So seems like some of you are finding it. If you can find the questions box and just introduce yourselves, let us know what city you're in, what organization you're with, and what's your role. So I'll read off a couple of responses here. Certainly won't get through everyone, they're flying in, but we have Caitlin from Chicago, Big Buzz Ideas Group. She's communications manager. Sarah Thompson, director of communications at Urban Alliance in East Hartford, Connecticut. We have Claudia from Little Rock. Don't see her organization name, that might come in later. Let's see who else. We have Seth, the CEO of Jewish Federation of Delaware in Wilmington, Delaware. We have Annalise from Middleton, Wisconsin, Wisconsin Retired Educators Association, assistant to the executive director. We have Audrey from SGA Youth and Family Services, marketing and communications manager here in very hot and steamy Chicago. Who else? Let's see. Lorena in New York with Horizons, the associate producer. Tony from Tulsa, Oklahoma, communications coordinator at Revitalize T-Town. I could go on and on. You all get the idea. Don't worry if I didn't say your name or the organization you're with. I just got almost 100 responses very, very quickly. So you're on the line. We're seeing your responses, and now you're well oriented to where the questions box is. Please continue, like I said, to use this questions box throughout. Questions for our guests. Also, if you're having any sort of technical issues, you can always chat in the questions box, and I'll keep an eye on it. So as Christina mentioned, I'm Alyssa Conrarty, president of Prosper Strategies. We're a Chicago-based marketing firm that works exclusively with nonprofits on marketing and brand strategy and implementation. And that work has brought us in contact with a lot of successful approaches to marketing leadership and some less successful ones as well. So I'm really looking forward to having this discussion today with two real thought leaders in this space who have a lot to share about the way that they're structuring marketing leadership and approaching it both on a regional level here in Chicago and on a national level at OneGoal. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Caitlin to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, this is Caitlin. I am the Senior Director of Marketing at OneGoal. I've been here for 6 years. I started here at OneGoal in fundraising on the Chicago team and then have been doing marketing and communications work on our national team for the last 3 years. I have an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis and a marketing degree from the University of Alabama.
Thanks so much, Caitlin. And Chloe, how about you?
Hi guys, I'm Chloe. I'm Director of External Affairs for OneGoal in Chicago. So I've been on the Chicago team for almost 4 years. Prior to joining OneGoal, I was an AmeriCorps Vista Fellow for a large foundation in Chicago. I have my master's in public affairs from Indiana University, where I specifically focused on nonprofit management.
All right, well, thank you both. And we'll get into what OneGoal does and how both Chloe and Caitlin are thinking about marketing leadership more in just a moment. Can't wait to hear their perspectives. But first, want to spend a few minutes sort of introducing today's topic. So this is our agenda for today's webinar. As Christina mentioned, these webinars are based on the commitments in our nonprofit marketing manifesto, and today we're focused on commitment number 7. So would like to introduce the ideas behind that commitment and what it really means in the context of our day-to-day work. We'll then transition into what we'll spend most of our time on today's webinar, a Q&A with Chloe and Caitlin, based on some questions I've prepared. And then we'll wrap up by taking your questions and sharing some other resources that will help you go deeper into this work. So everyone ready to dive in? I will take that as a yes. All right. So we're here today to talk about taking your nonprofit's marketing leadership to the next level. And that's because commitment number 7 in the Nonprofit Marketing Manifesto says we will ensure that marketing is overseen at the highest level of our organizations and contributed to by everyone on our teams. This commitment goes on to say that we will give marketing and communications a seat at the leadership table and a spot on the board meeting agenda. And while this is the ideal, I think many of you on the line are probably saying, yeah, sounds nice, but that's not really always the reality. So today we're going to spend some time talking about how we can move from what the reality might look like at many of your organizations closer to that ideal. I think we need to start though with talking about the best case scenario for how marketing leadership can and should be managed within nonprofit organizations before we can transition to discussing how you can evolve to get there. So let's begin there. In the best case scenario, as we see it, and again, this is based on the work we've done with dozens, if not maybe close to 100 different marketing departments at this point. Best case scenario as we see it is that your organization will have a marketing and communications leader on your executive team who reports directly to your CEO. And in an ideal world, this varies from organization to organization, but our favorite structure is one where that person sits side by side with a development or fundraising leader who they collaborate with closely. As you can see from this visual on your screen here, in our ideal world, we like to bucket marketing and communications together, at least at that highest level of leadership. We're calling it MarCom. And we talk about it as marketing when simplifying things. That's because the lines between marketing and comms have really blurred a ton in the last several years, to the point where the two disciplines look very similar, contribute to each other in really important ways, and are really best suited to become kind of one in the same department, at least at the highest level in most organizations. Now, this will differ for sure from organization to organization, whether you keep those in one bucket, but again, this is our ideal world. Every organization is structured differently and uses different titles and team sizes, and has different team sizes within their marketing communications department. So we've kept titles off of this organization chart, but what you're seeing here is sort of an example of what this could look like. So underneath the MarCom leader, you'd ideally have at least 1 or 2 people at the director level or in very senior roles overseeing their own teams, which you'd set up based on your organization's needs. And depending on the size of your organization, they then have a few mid-level people under them who would manage a couple of junior staff members to either fulfill a broad range of needs or specialize in specific areas. What's happening under MarCom is not as important here because that can vary significantly based on an organization, its mission, its size, its needs. What's most important is that this person who's in charge of marketing and communications is on the executive team, directly reporting to the CEO, sitting kind of in an equal playing field to others on the executive team in seats like operations and finance. Who you choose to put under that person, again, will be driven by your organization's marketing strategy, size, etc. So let's take a look at one specific organization structure under marketing, just to give you an idea of how this could look. So in this particular example, the marketing leader has the title of Chief Marketing Officer, CMO, and this organization has chosen to structure their marketing communications department based on the tactics that they emphasize in their marketing strategy. So there's leaders in each tactical area that they emphasize: content, social, video, and paid, with sort of the side of project management. They have a project management group on the side to keep everything running smoothly, which is often a best practice. Of course, structuring by tactic or function, like what you're seeing here, isn't the only way to go. You can also structure by geography or program area or stakeholder segment. Those approaches are a little bit less common in the nonprofit sector than they are in corporate, but other ways to look at this. Again, what's constant across these examples is that there is someone in that leadership executive team role who's responsible for marketing and communications. So we've established that that's the first criteria for an ideal marketing leadership situation, that you have someone in marketing on the C-suite or executive team. The second criteria, which we lay out in our manifesto, is that all other departments or functions or roles realize that they play a role in marketing and contribute to the success of an organization's marketing and communications. So we believe that marketing should never exist in a silo. What we've seen in our work is that the organizations that are most effective are those that realize and kind of build into their culture this idea that every single staff member contributes to the way an organization shows up and represents itself to the outside world, and an organization that empowers staff in all departments to contribute to marketing. This might not be a formal contribution to marketing. It might be a matter of talking to your staff in different departments simply about, these are the key messages that we use in an organization, and here's how you can integrate them into your work in programs or in operations. They might not, have a formal marketing contribution outside of how they talk about the organization, but you understand that whatever they're doing in their day-to-day work, it does contribute to that reputation, and therefore everyone plays a role in marketing. So again, this was an ideal. It might not sound like the reality for many of you on the line. So what should you do if your organization is far from this ideal? I want to share a couple of ideas about where to begin, and then we'll dig into this much more deeply in our conversation with Caitlin and Chloe today, since they don't necessarily fit every piece of this ideal picture either, and they're working through it and succeeding anyway. But if you're looking at, we'd like to move closer to this ideal world, where do we start? I think you should always start by advocating for a spot for a marketing leader on your executive team, even if that person is not you. I know we have a lot of different roles on this webinar today. We have some people who are in the executive director or CEO role and could make that decision. We have others who are, maybe associates in the communications department and would not have the decision-making power to make a leadership role for marketing. But I think everyone can have conversations about and advocate for getting someone in a marketing seat to be part of the executive team. If that's not going to happen for whatever reason, there are a lot of constraints that could keep someone from taking a marketing seat on your executive or leadership team. The senior most person on your marketing team ideally would report to your CEO, but if they don't, you at least want to see if you can get that person some monthly FaceTime with your CEO and align into your board. Without that sort of access, marketing really can't become this essential part of your organization's culture that it needs to be, and do everything that it's capable of doing to drive your mission forward. So again, you can't get someone on that leadership team. What kind of access can they get to the CEO to talk about marketing and ingraining marketing in your strategy? If neither of those things can happen, or even if they can, really, you should also focus in the early stages of building toward this ideal on growing your marketing team slowly and deliberately, one essential hire at a time. Each time you bring someone new on, make sure that, one, you're clear on what sort of goals they're there to drive, and then you're actually setting their role up so that they're accountable to those goals. You're measuring the results of their work and showing the proof of the impact that that person has, not just on your team, but on your organization's goals. And as this happens, as you continue to grow your marketing team over time, even at small organizations, and it becomes clear that everyone on that team is in some way measurably moving your mission forward, it'll be easier to make the case for building out a larger marketing team, for finding more investment in marketing, because you'll be tying back to the mission. So just a couple of ideas to kind of get you started there. Like in so many other commitments that we featured on previous webinars, this one is really best understood in practice, not in theory, because the ideal is never quite the reality. And since every organization looks pretty different when it comes to marketing leadership, I'm really excited to welcome Chloe and Caitlin and ask them some questions to really get at what this looks like in the real world in an organization that's leading marketing both on a national level and then on a regional level here in Chicago. So welcome again, you two, and it's time for you to take the stage now as we go through a few questions. All right, so first question, Chloe and Caitlin, would like to hear a bit about what each of you does at OneGoal, how your roles are different, and then how the two of you work together and collaborate between the regional level, Chloe, you lead here, and the national level for you, Caitlin. So Caitlin, let's start with you.
Sounds great. So we are a regional national model, meaning our program operates in 6 different cities across the country. And so we have national functions that support all of those regions to make our work happen. And so marketing and communications is one of those functions that supports all 6 of our regions. And that's what you see in the chart at the top of this slide. And then within our team is structured by area of expertise for the most part. So we have a designer, we have someone focused on PR, we have someone focused on digital communications, and then there is me, and I am more of a generalist. And so one of my big responsibilities is to oversee all of the support that we're providing to our regions and be more of a project manager. And so what I do is work with all of those regions on their annual plans, make sure they know what kind of support is available to them, and then delegate the different pieces of those projects to my teammates to make sure that we're executing on all of the things for them. Chicago is our largest region by a pretty significant margin, and so excited to be here with Chloe, who is one of our only 2 staff members we have at the regional level that has marketing and communications as part of their job. And so because of Chicago's size and their ability to have Chloe and her team, her and I are able to do additional work together and really take the marketing and communications work in Chicago to the next level. So I'll let her talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so given Chicago's size, we have made this team of external affairs, which is an umbrella term for us that covers 2 functions, fundraising and Marcom. So I lead the Marcom piece of that, and we focus on implementing Caitlin's national Marcom vision in Chicago. We create events that bring donors closer to our program work, and then we're also responsible for leading on the logistics piece for the gala. So we kind of are a do all things in Chicago team. Caitlin and I work really closely in a couple different ways. So when I'm implementing her team's strategies in Chicago, like placing giant swag orders or distributing materials or collecting content from folks in my region. And we also, as you can see from our visual, have a dotted line relationship where we're collaborating and sharing knowledge on a regular basis. We actually check in every other week so that we can work on special projects, discuss how we are interacting with other staff, and talking about how we're going to build buy-in for the rest of the Chicago region into our Marcom work.
It's really great. And I think there's probably quite a few organizations on the line today who have this sort of working relationship where national and regional are collaborating. And those of you who maybe you're at smaller local organizations can take a lot, I think, from both sides. So can't wait to learn more. Caitlin, we spoke a little bit at the start of this webinar about the need for marketing to have sort of a seat at the table among the highest level of leadership at the organization, whether that's the executive team or at board meetings. Does that happen at OneGoal National, and can you tell us why or why not?
Yes, we currently do not have a technical seat at the table, I guess I would say. So we do have an executive leadership team, and marketing and communications is currently not represented on ELT, as we would call it for short. That being said, I love that you brought up the point about sort of demonstrating your value and building that trust. And what I have seen over the last 3 years is that our team lead, my manager, has done an outstanding job of building relationships across all ELT members and really demonstrating the importance of marketing and communications and the value that she can bring. So she has a great relationship with both our outgoing and incoming CEO, and then her manager is our president, who is absolutely on the ELT. And so even though she's not technically at the table when those meetings happen, her voice is heard in those meetings constantly. And so it's kind of the best case scenario, I guess, without having that actual seat at the table.
Right. And it's sort of that one level removed scenario that we talked about on that last slide that I shared with kind of examples of how you can move toward the ideal if you can't have someone in that role with a seat on the executive leadership team or whatever you might call it at your organization, making sure that they have that line in through someone who does have that seat and that they have a strong relationship is the next best thing. All right. So Caitlin, tell us how you think about the role that marketing and communications plays in advancing OneGoal's mission nationally, and tell us how that perspective has impacted the way your leadership team structure is set up and how your marketing team structure is set up at OneGoal, both nationally and regionally.
So OneGoal's mission is to close the degree divide in America. And here you see a couple of different snippets of marketing and communications work in doing that. So our website, our annual report, some different photos and whatnot. And so I want to share two key ways that I see us having a direct contribution to closing that post-secondary degree divide. The first is the word together. So our core values all share that word and that theme. And our work is extremely collaborative. So we don't believe that we can achieve our mission without collaboration across many different groups of stakeholders like teachers and principals, school administrators, post-secondary folks, donors, and then obviously our communities that we're in. And so similarly, our role on marketing and communications is to create brand advocates within each of those different audiences so that we can serve more students and serve them better. And so I love this photo in the top left that is on our website, because actually in this photo, there are two of our students. There is a board member, there is a staff member, and there is one of our post-secondary contacts. So it's just a great snippet of all the different folks that it takes to make our work happen. And so we really want that to come across in our marketing and communications work. And then the second thing I want to share is that we are very we are always trying to be fellow focused. We call our students fellows, and so it really is all about the students. And hopefully, again, that's like clear in these visuals that I selected. But we're always thinking about how our materials and messaging represent the authentic experience of our fellows and our belief in their brilliance. And so that's always really top of mind for us too. And so from a structural perspective, what this means is just making sure that collaboration and togetherness, as well as our focus on students, is being communicated at the leadership level through our team lead, and is infiltrating all of the work, right? So we can produce these wonderful materials that look beautiful and make our students look great, but if that is not being felt across the whole organization, then it's not authentic. And so we view our work with regions very much a representation of how, like, we're constantly learning from one another, how we need to build the relationship with one another to really understand the work on the ground happening so that we are representing it in an authentic way. And then in turn, the stuff that we're producing is really helping our regions do their work better.
Right. That's great. Yeah, and none of that happens, that authentic representation of your work doesn't happen without effective marketing and communications leadership. So we'd love to hear from you both, starting with you, Caitlin, since you're continuing on from the last question. In your view, what makes a marketing and communications leader effective, both, I would say, generally in the nonprofit sector and then on the national level at an organization like OneGoal?
So I alluded to this a little bit when I was talking about our team leader and her ability to build relationships with our leadership team. But in my role too, relationship building is so incredibly important. I've spent so much time over the last 3 years in my role getting to know our regions and getting to know the regional staff that I'm working with. You just can't work together effectively if you don't have that trust, and building that trust and that belief in each other's areas of expertise just requires time. And so being a mostly remote staff member, I've had to even think creatively about what that means for the folks I work with who I don't see on a regular basis. Since I'm obviously one person, I can't be in 6 cities at the same time all the time. So just really investing that time and getting to know the people that I'm working with and getting to know their needs. We as a marketing and communications team like to think of ourselves as extremely client focused, and our clients are our fellow teammates and staff members. So.
Right. Yeah, I love that mindset. And Chloe, I'm sure it's in some ways the same on the regional level, but what would you call out about what makes a marketing leader effective on the regional level at an organization like OneGoal?
Totally. I mean, obviously completely agree that relationship building is so important. And I would add that flexibility is really critical. So to take Marcom and make it part of all of our work streams, we have to be able to flex and adapt to each team's priorities and needs. Everyone on the Chicago region is on the ground executing with our students, and it's so important for me, and I've really seen, as a region, I've seen Caitlin do this, being able to listen to them and receive their input on what we're planning and then make adjustments is really important in order to move things forward and for them to be effective for, as Caitlin said, our clients,
right.
The other folks we're working with in the region.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think just that mindset of saying these are our clients is critical. Okay, so this question's for both of you, and Caitlin, we'll start again here with you. So you have a CEO on the national level and an executive director on the regional level. So Caitlin, for you, how does your CEO view marketing and communications and their role within it?
Yeah, so our CEO has historically been very external facing. That was the reason that we actually hired a president several years ago, so one person can focus more internally, and our CEO would have the flexibility to be a primarily external facing person. And so building that relationship through proving the value that you're bringing and sort of a proven track record of working well together, and preparing that CEO for the different situations that he or she might be in, working with a variety of different stakeholders. And so it is a pretty good setup structurally that our team lead reports directly to the president, who is a more internal facing person, but then has that great relationship with the CEO and is meeting on a regular basis. To also make sure that that person feels really equipped to do their job well.
Right.
And then we too, as a national team, also work with EDs. It looks a little different in every region, just kind of depending on their size. But we know that just the way that CEO buy-in is really important at the national level, having that executive director buy-in is super important at the regional level. So right now I'm in the middle of annual planning with regions, and while the executive director is not necessarily in every meeting I'm having, they were looped in before the meeting happened, and so they know the meeting is happening. They have folks on their team filling them in or answering their questions if they have them. And so having that buy-in at the regional level is super important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chloe, tell us more about that. So you're working more intimately with the regional CEO here, or ED here in Chicago. What does that look like, and how does that buy-in kind of differ from on the national level, or that involvement differ?
Yeah, well, we are really, really lucky that our Chicago executive director has been bought into Marcom from the start, and is now, thanks to national support, getting 2 different touch points regularly with them. So with Caitlin's team, but also from me. So our executive director, similar to our national CEO, is extremely external facing. She is effectively a part of our fundraising team. And so my manager, our team lead for external affairs, reports directly to her. Okay. So Sarah, our executive director, is hearing a lot about marketing communications all the time. I get to talk to her at least once a week about what's going on, and we have priorities directly related to her being external facing and doing like taking part in marketing in a lot of different ways. And so because we've also built up this team over time and kind of made those smart hires as we go, like you were talking about earlier, she knows that I am her expert for this. So if something comes up, it's like a built-in process that she's going to touch base with me immediately.
Sure. Yeah, and that's absolutely an ideal situation where, you know, your executive director, your CEO knows that they have expertise in other areas and knows that their time is best spent in other areas and looks to you as a marketing and communications leader to be an expert when it comes to marketing and communications and their partner in how their role and their function in the organization can advance your marketing goals and therefore the organization's goals, right? So it sounds like from that perspective, even though maybe you don't have that ideal structure exactly as we laid it out at the top of this webinar, you have the right mindsets on your leadership team to help marketing play the role it needs to play. That's awesome. Okay, so Chloe, let's stay with you for a minute here. OneGoal has grown a ton in the time that you've been at the organization. You've doubled your staff size. So how has that changed the role that you've had to play as a marketing leader at OneGoal Chicago?
So as you said, we have experienced this rapid growth. So when I actually started at OneGoal 4 years ago, we didn't have an external affairs team. I wasn't even technically, my role didn't really have Marcom as part of it. I just ended up doing it organically, but I was really part of the fundraising team. And so as we've grown, and you can see from this chart that we have a lot of moving parts on our program team, we really identified that there needed to be someone dedicated as sort of a middleman who would work on Marcom both for fundraising and for program. And so that's why we made the distinction between development and Marcom on the external affairs side. So my role has shifted from being someone who's just executing projects to now being more about advocating for why Marcom is important for everyone. So a percentage of my job is really dedicated to being responsive to team leads, especially on the program team. And I work with them to understand their priorities, to talk about how I or National can support them. And kind of what Caitlin was talking about earlier with building trust and relationships, I'm doing that on a regional level so that I can prove that we can help push their program work forward. And it not only makes our work more effective, but also makes it then easier for Caitlin to get buy-in on national campaigns as well. So it's sort of serving multiple purposes of building these relationships internally.
Yeah, and I would imagine there's a lot of education there too, right?
Absolutely.
About, I guess on the broadest level, the role that marketing and communication should play in an organization in the nonprofit sector, and then more specifically, what your marketing strategy is nationally and regionally, and then how their program fits into that. I think something that a lot of organizations face, and I'm sure this will come up when we get to audience Q&A, is just constant demands from programs that are not aligned with the bigger picture strategy, right? And so it sounds like a big part of your role is navigating that, but doing it in a more proactive way through educating your programs, making sure their needs are served and that they're aligned with that bigger strategy.
It is. We ask a lot of, and Caitlin has really helped me learn this skill, asking a lot of questions when people come to us with requests about what are you trying to accomplish? What is like the key purpose behind this, so that we can kind of dig into how we're connecting back to strategy.
Right, because otherwise you're just becoming sort of an order taker from programs, and that's not going to drive anything forward long term. Great, really helpful to hear about that. Okay, so Caitlin, it sounds from what I've heard like you've done a lot of experimentation on the national level to sort of find the processes and structures that work best for fostering strong marketing leadership and then making sure that there's strong working relationships between national and regional. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you've experimented with so far, what's worked, what hasn't, what are you trying now? Just take us through that journey.
Yes, so a journey is a great way to describe it. So the first thing I'll say is just be willing to try something new, to, try something and learn from it, take things that worked and then scrap the things that didn't. We've tried something a little bit different every single year I've been in this role, and I'm excited for what we're going to do this year, but I would say it's probably not the magic bullet either. So that process of constantly learning and improving is super important. So one thing we did that we're no longer doing is a liaison structure. So in our other 5 regions where we don't have a Chloe, we had a liaison who was sort of our go-to person in the region for marketing and communications. And while I was able to build a great relationship with those folks, the downside of the liaison structure was that that person felt like they had this additional task or set of responsibilities that really wasn't baked into their job description, and that also didn't feel super integrated into their work. So if that liaison was a fundraising person, you know, we were asking them questions about program, and so it was creating a lot of extra work for them to have to then go back to other folks on their team and get us answers or figure out what to do. And so it just wasn't super effective. And it also didn't allow us to advocate for the value of marketing and communications across the region. Everyone in that region sort of viewed Marcom as like, that's the thing that our liaison does. I don't have to worry about that, which is not the way that you want your staff to be thinking about marketing and communications. So we have since moved away from that structure and are trying some new things this year that will help it feel more integrated. And so I put these photos on this slide. This was our recent brand rollout. We actually just updated our brand. What you see here is a little bit different. Our logo's changing and whatnot. But it was a very exciting day for all of our staff, and I was able to rally support from across our regions by leveraging the folks who I have built relationships with, and those folks are in a variety of roles. So they weren't all fundraising, they weren't all program, they weren't all former liaisons. They were just folks who I had taken the time to really invest in the work that we're doing, and they were then excited to invest their teams. And so the top left is actually the photo of Chicago, and Chloe is a great example of someone who has really invested all of Chicago in marketing and communication. And so some of the things we'll be trying this year will be to quarterly plan as a region, and to use a worksheet to track all of our progress and to connect individual project owners with one another. So instead of having a liaison in charge of all the projects, we'll identify at the beginning of the quarter, this person is going to work with Marcom on this project, and this person is going to work with Marcom on that project. And so that way, there's no middleman. It's really just the two folks driving the work forward that needs to get done, and also then allows our team to build relationships with many more people in the region. So I'm excited to do that this year.
That's great. That's great. And I would think that it will be a time saver on both ends, because you won't be having to kind of have that information that gets lost in translation, or that takes time for someone to go back and collect. It'll be kind of direct from the source. And I love what you said too about just don't be afraid to experiment. I feel like the organizations that we work with that evolve most and achieve most from a marketing and communications perspective are those that really every year they're questioning their assumptions about the way they've handled that function within their organizations, and they're trying new things. They're saying, okay, we might be somewhat comfortable with the way this is working, but we can always do more, do better. So I echo that. Change is sometimes hard and scary, and it's easy to get comfortable, but keep trying to change up the system and make it better, because there's always ways we can improve. And in marketing and communications particularly, there's constant evolution that we need to keep up with, and often that means structuring our teams in new ways to meet new demands. All right. So this one, I think some people were probably shaking their heads about when I talked about at the top of the webinar. I talked about the idea that everyone on your team should contribute to marketing and communications in some shape or form. I bet a lot of you on the line aren't experiencing that and are feeling like if marketing and communications is getting any buy-in at all at your organization, it's a win, right? And to get others invested in it, wow, that just sounds like a total pipe dream, right? So I know that OneGoal has succeeded at this in some ways, and I'd love to hear how you both, Chloe and Caitlin, are going about getting others who are in non-Marcom roles on your teams to play a role in advancing marketing and to see themselves as folks who have that role. So Caitlin, let's start with you on the national level.
Yeah, so I think I would just go back to it being integrated into the work that they're doing. So again, getting them not to think about this as like a thing they have to do on the side, but how it's really driving their work forward. And so I've been doing a lot more listening. I've been trying to have the region share with me first. So, like, what are your priorities? What are you hoping to accomplish this year? And then to show them how the stuff that we're doing fits in with that. And so it doesn't feel like this extra thing. It feels like, oh, okay, I see like you're already doing this and I'm already doing that. Those things are very aligned, and this is actually going to make my life easier at the end of the day. Okay, great. Let's get started on this. And Chloe just did a super successful project that you see here that I'm going to let her talk a little bit about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chloe, over to you.
Yeah, so I know I've said this before, but it literally for us always comes down to putting Marcom in the context of what other staff are working on. So I thought it might be helpful to give like a really clear and recent example of a way that we did this. So we every year create a video to premiere at our gala. It is a huge part of our fundraising strategy. It's absolutely critical for that team. However, it's one of those things, as Caitlin said, that can feel like a really big ask of the program team because it's not technically part of their job. And so I need their support to make a strong video. And this year, I tried to be really intentional about how I was building that investment. And so I recruited my colleague, David, who you can see being interviewed here. He's a director of teacher support on the program team. And I knew we wanted to feature one of our OneGoal classrooms. And so I looped him in super early to this project, like earlier than I would have in the past. He gave input on my strategy. He helped select the classroom we were going to film in. He reviewed all the interview questions. So throughout, I was able to build those connections between what is he working on, his priorities of building engagement at this school, of supporting our teacher in that classroom, and also what he's personally passionate about. We discussed a lot of topics about our curriculum and sort of got to the points that he really loves. And so as a result, he was excited about it. He was invested in the filming. His interview was an incredible part of the video. You can watch it on our YouTube page if you're curious. And it ended up being a very effective strategy because of that.
Right. And you engage him at every point so that you weren't asking him to read from a script or hit talking points that you had to find as important. You shaped that together.
Well, yeah, and I did as much as I could to make the work approachable and in little bite-sized chunks for him, right? So it wasn't taking up his work time. I was still like holding and project managing and doing as much as I could. And it just helped him be involved and feel like he really was like a driving force.
Right. More about engaging him than about having him actually carry the weight of the
exactly.
work. Yeah, and I'm sure the end product was a lot better as a result. I think that's a great example of just small ways that you can involve others in your organization in the work that you're doing, and then have them serve as examples and honestly spokespeople internally for the great work that marketing is doing. People are often proud when they're featured in these sorts of things, or when they're featured in media, and they like to talk to their colleagues about it. And before you know it, you might be in a situation right now where you don't have a lot of involvement from outside of your marketing and communications function. But before you know it, you might be getting requests for how can I help? How can I get involved? I want to be in that video. I want to be featured in an interview. And that's the ideal scenario.
Yep.
Okay, so final question from me, and then we'll transition over to the audience. Caitlin, starting with you, if you could give today's audience just one more key piece of advice for taking their marketing and communications leadership to the next level, what would it be?
So I would just say it's really important to meet people where they're at. As someone whose full-time job is marketing and communications, that is my area of expertise, but it's not supposed to be the area of expertise for the people that I'm supporting. And so often I think what causes a lack of engagement in marketing and communications is not really a lack of interest, but more of a lack of understanding or a fear that they're supposed to know more or be more of an expert than they are. And so everything I'm doing, I'm trying to make our tools as easy to use as possible. And I'm trying to make our work and our team as approachable as possible, so that folks don't think of us as, just the brand police, or Marcom's going to, tell me I did something wrong. But instead, Marcom is a partner who has a skill set that I don't have and don't have to have, because they're going to come in and help me and elevate my work.
Yeah, I love that. Marketing is the expert in marketing. You're the expert in the area you work in, and together we can create something strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Chloe, how about you?
I think from a regional perspective, the thing that I would give to everyone is staying aware of what the priorities are across your team. I think it's really easy for me to get very invested in, like, here are the mark on things that I want to do. But I also have been pushing myself, especially in our annual planning, which is happening right now, to understand what is the program team focusing on this year? What is the development team focusing on? That way, when it comes time for me to push my things forward, I can relate it to what they're doing, but also be understanding of the stuff that they're working on,
Sure.
so that I can sort of weigh the importance of different projects in the pipeline. I just think that doing that takes it the step further of making Marcom an element of every work stream.
Right. Yep. That's great. And not easy to do in the day-to-day. Might
Right.
sound easy to talk about, but I'm sure that's one of the big themes of struggle in your day-to-day
Yes.
role. Great. Well, really exciting conversation, and I'm seeing some good questions come in from the audience. I know you're all eager to get involved. So as a reminder, you can find that questions box within the GoToWebinar tool. Start typing your questions in, and I'll take a couple of initial questions that came in while we were talking about the questions that I prepared. So the first question comes from Camille. And Caitlin, let's have you answer this one first, because you mentioned that you're remote. She says, I'd like to hear more about cultivating leadership and trust in a remote office. Do you have any tips in regard to that?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm kind of an odd bird. I'm technically a remote staff member, but I do live in one of our regions. So Atlanta is a OneGoal region, and so I split my time between this office and at home. And you would think that that would mean that my relationship with Atlanta is just way beyond the other regions, and that's not true. I have a great relationship with the folks here in Atlanta, but I have great relationships with folks in other regions who I hardly ever see. And so one thing that I would just recommend is getting on the phone, or if you use video conference, doing video conference whenever possible. It's really easy to be a remote staff member and do everything via email and GChat. Yep. And to think that that's kind of a more efficient way or quicker way to get things done. And sometimes it is, but you do just really miss that face time. And so I have prioritized, hopping on the phone or scheduling a meeting, even if, it's like, oh, another meeting, but it just really is important to have that time. And then the other thing is just thinking about the different technology that we can use to be more transparent and to make our tools more accessible. So we have revamped the way that we kind of share all of our stuff. So like our logos and our photos and all of that stuff. We've invested in a digital asset manager that stores everything for us, but then also kind of serves as like an internal blog and allows us to communicate that information back out. And so just making a really accessible tool for folks so they feel like I know exactly where to go. If Caitlin's not available, I still can find what I need since they can't, pop by my desk because I'm hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, really, really helpful. And I'll just add a few of my own thoughts to that, just because we've worked with a few clients that have fully remote offices, and it sounds like that might be your situation, Camille. I think you still can't underestimate the importance of bringing everyone together in person a few times a year. If that's for some sort of planning retreat or even just team building, culture building, just having that face time and that ability to have conversations that aren't necessarily task or goal oriented all the time, but help people actually build relationships is still critically important. And even though we can communicate in mostly the same ways, thanks to all this technology we have available today, there's just something that I think can get lost in a fully remote office in terms of those relationships that aren't purely work oriented and that help people build trust in one another, that allows them to then collaborate more on the work oriented side of things. I definitely echo some of the things that Caitlin said about your technology. For us, one of the things that's been most important when working with clients that have fully remote teams is ensuring that there's some sort of centralized project management system and that the right people are looped in on the right information, but that also people can sort of peek into things that maybe don't necessarily directly relate to their work, just so that they can stay looped in and sort of aware of what's going on. And there's so many great tools at our fingertips today, so investigate all of those, but then I would say at the same time, don't underestimate the importance of investing a little bit to bring people together here and there. And Chloe, I don't know, do you have remote folks that you work with in the region at all? Anything to add there?
We really don't. We're lucky that we have, even though a lot of folks work from home, we're all in office together on a regular basis.
Yeah, okay. Well, good. Hope that was helpful, Camille. And then I want to take a question from Claudia here. Claudia asks, how do you measure your impact to verify that your marketing and communications efforts are on the right track? Chloe, do you want to take a first stab at this one? It's a big question.
Yeah, and I want to start by saying I don't think that we've nailed this yet. Like, I think that this is very much something that we're trying to figure out we just started our new fiscal year on July 1st, and I think this is something we're trying to figure out for this year. Historically, we have rows on what we call our dashboard where we track our outcomes, but they're really yes or no questions. Like, did you have a gala? Did it go well?
Checklist,
yeah, sort of. So I've been working with Caitlin a little bit to try to establish some priorities, and actually a next step that I'm taking next week with my team lead is writing out some strategies that are going to live in our dashboard. So it's not really an answer, but we're trying to do it. And it's like a stay tuned. I know, Caitlin, you're farther along than we are in the region, so I feel like you could totally speak to this too.
Yeah, I would agree with everything Chloe said and say that we're getting there, but still trying new things all the time. I think this is something that's top of mind for our team all the time, and we always talk about, like, should we do this thing again? Because we really don't have any evidence that it, like, it got good feedback, but like, did it really lead to more principals signing up for OneGoal? We're not really sure. So I do think it's just a lot of insight gathering and feedback gathering is super important. So the one thing I will say that has been really helpful is to go to the source. So something my team is prioritizing when we come together on a quarterly basis is making sure that we get in a classroom. Because one thing we uncovered this past year when we were in a classroom is that many of our students who were, OneGoal fellows, didn't really know what OneGoal was still. They all kind of had a different idea, or at least when they joined, they had a little bit of a different idea of exactly what OneGoal was. And so that obviously cued us to rethink the way that we're recruiting our students and the messages that we want to come across most clearly in those recruitment efforts. So I would say our biggest source of measuring our success has been those insights and we've done a program director focus group before that was really helpful in rethinking our teacher recruitment strategies and stuff like that. So whenever you can go directly to your audience and actually spend the time asking them a bunch of strategic questions and kind of quizzing them. Another idea that actually just came up a few weeks ago with that video project that Chloe and I were working on that she just talked about was asking a person who knows nothing about OneGoal to watch one of our videos and then to tell us what they thought OneGoal was. So I think there's some like creative ways that you can kind of do on a project by project basis. And that's kind of how we're approaching it at the moment.
Really helpful. You both hit on a couple of important points. I think, Chloe, what you mentioned, no one is perfect when it comes to measuring the impact of marketing. I think that we want to think that because we have so many types of data and analytics at our fingertips today that everyone else is doing this better than we are and has this totally figured out. But I will tell you, and again, we work with dozens, if not maybe 100 plus organizations, no one is doing this perfectly. There's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of areas where you might be able to see the correlation between what you do from a marketing and communications perspective and achieving certain goals, but it's not necessarily the causation. There's a lot of kind of areas where you're just blind. You don't have data that you need to determine how things are working. So I would look at measuring impact, and you say verifying, Claudia, that your Marcom efforts are on the right track. I would look at that as something that you need to take baby steps in the right direction toward and do what you can little by little. I always like to go back to this idea of your marketing goals should be in direct alignment with the goals in your organization's strategic plan. And then to the level that it's possible, you should determine a couple of key measurables that indicate whether you're advancing that goal or not. And if they don't indicate it directly, maybe they show at least some correlation, right? And then track those things in some sort of dashboard or spreadsheet on a regular basis using the tools that you have available. In some cases, you're going to be using hard data and hard numbers. In some cases, it'll be more of a qualitative assessment, a yes, no, or, we interview people and they seem to have a better understanding this year of what we stand for and what we do than last year. So do what you can, right? Any information is better than none, but don't feel like this is an area that you're lagging behind just because you don't have it completely buttoned up and perfect. I'll also mention that we have a webinar on the topic of measurement coming up. I believe it's in September, and it's with the folks at Mission Measurement. They're an organization that's really pioneering the way nonprofits measure impact on their mission, and we're going to be talking about how you align marketing measurement with mission measurement. So stay tuned for that. There should be some good ideas to come out of it, but it's an area that I think everyone needs to do a lot of work on, and that's going to be continually evolving for the nonprofit sector and even outside of the sector. Okay, so moving on to our next question, and this is probably a pretty quick one from Lori. Speaking of centralized project management systems, any recommendations? So I think we can each say what we're using or what we have used. At Prosper, we use a tool called Teamwork. We love it. It's fantastic. We've also used Basecamp previously. That's great, a little bit more simple and cost effective. What do you use at OneGoal, or what have you used in the past, Chloe?
We don't really we're huge fans of Google, and so a lot of our stuff is shared project management tools through them. We also use a custom Salesforce database that we've built. So specifically for the gala, we have some elements of our project management that go through there, but haven't done anything super centralized.
Okay.
It's really project by project.
Yep. Yeah, we're big Google fans here too for collaboration. Yeah. Google Docs, Google Drive, everything makes a big difference. I've heard great things about Asana. What else comes to mind? Those are kind of the biggies. I would say if you want kind of an entry-level tool, start with Basecamp.
Yeah, we're about to start using Asana on the national Marcom side.
Right.
I'm so excited to test that out for the first time.
Okay.
And then we also, our digital asset manager binder has the capability to do project management. We just don't use that function currently. But I, from what I understand, if you're a pretty, kind of asset heavy organization and design heavy organization, that tool I think is very powerful. So it's Binder is the name of the software. It's BYNDER.
I've had a couple of people mention that to me recently, so sounds like it's worth checking out for sure. Okay, this next one is a good one that I'm sure many of you online are asking. So Jessica asks, any advice for a much, and she capitalizes much, smaller organization, i.e. I am the development, marketing, communications, and PR team, and graphic design. How to focus priorities with so many running projects? Any thoughts on that? I know it's not the role that either of you sit in necessarily, but your teams are not huge either. Yeah. Chloe, it sounds like you might have some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, man, I feel you, especially on the regional level. Like I am doing Marcom, I work with PR. I used to design a bunch of stuff for our Chicago team before we hired a national designer, and so I totally understand that. I think the thing that was most helpful for me was to really get my manager on board with, and like align with my manager on what my priorities were, and then from there practice saying no to things.
Yeah.
And figuring out, like, one of the things we talk about at OneGoal is essentialism and understanding what is really essential to move our work forward, while also challenging the sense of urgency that often comes up in nonprofit work. And so it's hard, but being able to go back to what your core priorities are and figure out, is this flyer that I'm designing really critical? Is this something that I can let a team member do and then just check it so that I can have more capacity for what my core priorities are?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a struggle even at larger organizations, I think, because the marketing communications team is never big enough, even if it would fit that ideal structure that I showed at the beginning, which I know isn't the reality for most of you. It's never big enough for the vast needs of the organization. One thing that seems to work well for some of our clients and colleagues is first, have the marketing plan. Within that plan, have clear goals and priorities and be able to point back to that and ask questions about whether something that someone is asking you for is aligned with the strategy. And if it's not, to say either, you know, this doesn't make sense for us right now, here's some alternative ways to think about it, or let's table this for future quarterly strategy. Some of our clients will also create, based on their annual strategies, either quarterly or monthly work plans, where essentially they share organization-wide, here are the things that we're working on as a marketing and communications department, and we have, you know, 20 hours or whatever it may be of buffer time for other incoming requests. Those need to be submitted and vetted by, you know, you could have kind of a vetting process, people on your leadership team ideally, but otherwise they will be tabled for future work plans and worked in as time allows and as it makes sense. Of course, there will be things that come up that feel and maybe are rightfully emergencies, so you want to leave some time for that, but getting in that practice of sort of mapping out, this is the work we're doing this quarter or this month or whatever for your team, and then being able to point back to that and say, you know, this doesn't fit in, let's table it, is a pretty powerful thing. Caitlin, anything to add there that you do on the national level that works well?
Yeah, I would just add that, like, think about the time something's going to take you versus the time it might take you to contract with an expert in that particular area. So actually, when I started at OneGoal so long ago, we didn't even have a marketing and communications team. So I completely understand the wearing many hats. And, you know, at the end of the day, if it's going to take me hours upon hours to try to put together an annual report that looks compelling and on brand when I'm not a designer, the hours I spent on that are probably more expensive than had we just contracted with a designer to design the annual report, right? So think about the, like, what once you've kind of done what you said, Alyssa, with your priorities and you know what the most important things are, think about like where you add the most value with your time, and then think about where you can, you know, leverage other folks to help you out in the interim of like your team being really small. Certainly those things all cost money, so we don't all have unlimited budgets either, but that's helped us. I mean, even now, like we're still a small team, relatively speaking, given the number of students we're supporting. And so, you know, we have no plans to become video experts.
Sure.
I still manage those projects, as does Chloe, but we contract out with a video expert, right? So if that ever were to become like a huge priority of ours, then maybe we would think about how we would wrap that into someone's job. But I think just like knowing where your areas of expertise are and how those are aligned with your priorities, and then outsourcing whenever you can.
Yeah, I'm in support of that, especially as the owner of a firm that many times those needs gets outsourced to. I think we're able to, with some of the skill sets we have here on our team, be far more efficient than our clients would be in certain areas. And especially if we've worked with an organization for a while, we can plug right in and do something like an annual report in far less time. So be a smart way to go, and something that's good to reserve some budget for so that you can swing in some outside help when you need it. All right, so I will take one last question, and I might need it to be clarified in the chat. This one's from Miles, and Miles says, does anyone have any document management database suggestions? So Miles, if you could chat in a bit more information about what you mean by document management, we might be able to provide a better answer, but we've already talked about Google Drive and Google Docs. That's what we use here at Prosper to store all of our files in the cloud, to create documents that years ago we might have created in Word or Excel. It's all created online and in the cloud, and then we have shared folders that we use to share across teams and clients. Chloe, any difference for you all?
No, that's exactly what we do. All I'm trying to do with my team is make sure that things are really accessible, similar to what Caitlin's done with our asset manager nationally. Just make it as easy to use as possible.
Yep. Okay. And Miles says, I know there are systems to mass update letterhead and other constantly changing documents. We use Canva for some of that, where we have brand templates, and if you drag in a new logo, it'll update across. We haven't had any situations where we've mass updated collateral that way, because most of what we do is so custom. So if anyone else has any ideas for Miles, feel free to chat in the questions box and answer, and I'll read them off. But if not, I am going to transition us out here. Thank you, Chloe and Caitlin, for all of the great insights that you shared with us today. Really, really appreciate it. As we wrap up, I'd like to share just a few ways to go deeper with these sorts of conversations, if you're so inclined. So first, if you've been on our last 2 webinars, you've heard about this already, but we recently launched a closed Facebook group that is serving as a community for people who have been finding value in this webinar series, as well as sort of the wider world of nonprofit leaders and marketers and communicators. It's called the Nonprofit Marketing Collaborative. You can find the URL on your screen. I also dropped it into the chat box that popped up right when you joined the webinar. This is really intended to be a collaborative rather than a promotional community, so we don't use it to promote Prosper. We don't encourage members to use it to promote their recent fundraiser or things like that. It's a place to go to ask questions about things that you're struggling with, like some of these questions that we just got asked about what works for remote teams, what document management platforms work. You can share ideas there. So we'd love to have you join. You have to request and we will accept you quickly and can continue the conversation there. We also have a live in-person workshop coming up in Chicago for those of you who are interested in working with us on issues like how you structure your marketing team, your marketing budget. The workshop is called Build Your Nonprofit Marketing Plan. It's happening September 13th, and at the workshop, we will work hand in hand with our small group of attendees to develop their organization's marketing plans over the course of the day. We're going to include a mix of teaching sessions, interactive exercises, and group brainstorming that will guide you in your marketing planning efforts. And the idea is that you'll walk away with a full-fledged or mostly full-fledged marketing plan in hand that you can go back to your office and polish and then begin implementing. Workshop includes breakfast, lunch, and a post-planning happy hour celebration, which I'm sure we'll need after building a full marketing plan in one day, as well as complimentary copies of our essential nonprofit marketing planning template. And we are offering a special discount for all of our webinar attendees after every webinar. Workshops usually priced at $550, but you can register for $450 within the next 24 hours using the code webinar. And the link is on your screen here as well as in the chat box. So make sure you follow that. I'll include it in our follow-up email as well. And if you can't attend the workshop or just want to go beyond some of the free resources we've shared today or thoughts we've shared today, you can also find more information about some of these topics in our Essential Nonprofit Marketing Plan template, which we covered in detail 2 months ago in our webinar. That's a topic that's of interest to you, usually priced at $99. You can buy it today after today's webinar for $49. So link to that is on your screen as well. So hope you can join us on the Facebook group. Ideally, some of you will join us in person in Chicago for our workshop. We'd love to meet you. But in any case, look forward to seeing you either there or at our next webinar in August. August webinar will focus on the role your brand and marketing can play in building partnerships, both inside and outside of the nonprofit sector. Registration is not quite open yet, but it will be soon. So check back at prosper-strategies.com/webinars. We'll also make sure to get you a link to that when it goes live. Until then, as always, hope you'll continue building toward your marketing revolution at your nonprofit and let us know if we can be of any help. My contact information and our CEOs is up here on screen, so feel free to get in touch. And again, thank you, Chloe and Caitlin. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.